Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in today. Today we're going to be walking around Cleveland Park, which is a pretty quiet and beautiful and historic neighborhood in Washington, D.C. So if you're used to the hustle and bustle of downtown or Capitol Hill, or if you're visiting for the first time and you're looking for something different, I think you might find some interesting stuff in this video. We're going to talk about some facts of not only Cleveland Park, but of Washington, D.C. in general. As a local, I will give you some pretty good tips, maybe even some restaurant ideas, and hopefully the next time you go to D.C., you will have a more informative time. And if you're not going to D.C., you might just find this video interesting anyway. So one of the key things to know about Cleveland Park specifically is that it differs from a lot of different neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. because it's a little more residential and spread out. Directly to the right of these neighborhoods is an area that connects to Rock Creek Park in the east part of Cleveland Park. And Rock Creek Park is a really beautiful place where a lot of locals go. It connects basically to Maryland through various forests, and those forests themselves go into West Virginia as almost one continuous wooded area, which is pretty cool. But in these neighborhoods, there's a lot more yards, there's a lot more schools, and the reason for that is because when Washington was being built, it expanded from the center out, basically. So you had a different area, which wasn't part of Washington. It was called Georgetown, and they were two completely separate cities. And Georgetown is very old and very compact. There's not a lot of yards that have yards. There's some, but it's pretty rare. So when people were expanding, and after Georgetown and Washington, D.C. became connected, people were looking for a place to move out to. And Cleveland Park in the late 19th century was that place. All the farm fields that existed in Cleveland Park were torn down, and beautiful brick buildings were put up with ample yard space, and it became a place where a lot of the rich and wealthy people moved to. Now in the 1800s, Cleveland Park was notable because it was basically just farmland, and it connected to some other parts of D.C. It was close to the old soldiers' home where Abraham Lincoln used to ride his horse almost daily. He would go there. Another significant person from history that lived in the area was Grover Cleveland, who owned property in the area. Of course, Grover Cleveland was a U.S. president. He wasn't the only president that lived in the area. In the 1960s, after Cleveland Park was pretty well established, Lyndon Johnson resided in one of the more famous buildings in Cleveland Park during the time in which he was a U.S. congressman. The building that he lived in was called the Kennedy Warren. No relation to President Kennedy or to the Warren Commission on President Kennedy's death. This building was built in the early 1900s, and it was the most prominent of the great apartment buildings in Washington, D.C. It's still there. It's right next to the National Smithsonian Zoo. It's this beautiful, tall Art Deco building. If you're in the area, you can probably go in and look in the lobby. It's a great place to go check out. It's got a lot of history in and of itself, so if you want to see a video on that building specifically, we would love to do that. The Kennedy Warren was designed by an architect named Joseph Younger, who lived right on Connecticut Avenue. Joseph Younger became very depressed because what basically happened was the Kennedy Warren building couldn't be completed because of the Depression. It actually took many decades to finally complete the entire Kennedy Warren. So both the Kennedy Warren as well as the zoo are about 3 blocks from where we are right now in this video. And you can access both those buildings and this street basically right off Connecticut Avenue. And Connecticut Avenue is one of the main thoroughfares of basically all of Washington, D.C. If you are downtown or in Foggy Bottom, near the White House, you can take Connecticut Avenue northwest through DuPont Circle, and from there you'll end up in parts of Adams Morgan, the south of it, and up through Kalorama, which is where all of the embassies are. And from there you'll end up in Woodley Park, which is where the zoo is, and the zoo borders Cleveland Park directly. So if that gives you an idea, we're pretty much in the northwest of Washington, D.C. right now. Not the complete northwest. There you can go up farther and get to places like Tenleytown or American University, but we're pretty far in the northwest. However, because we have that middle ground, this is a really easy place to get to if you're a tourist and if you're just looking, or local, and you're just looking to kind of get away from the hustle and bustle. One of the other main thoroughfares of Washington, D.C. would be Wisconsin Avenue. Wisconsin Avenue basically runs from the Potomac through Georgetown up through a neighborhood called Glover Park and Cathedral Heights, and kind of bisects Cleveland Park in many ways. Maybe not directly, but it's pretty close. As we walk, we're going to get to the National Cathedral, which is directly on Connecticut Avenue. For those of you that don't know, the National Cathedral is one of the more significant and beautiful buildings in Washington, D.C. However, a lot of the locals that go there end up not really seeing the neighborhood that they're around. I think a lot of the tour buses actually come up to the National Cathedral underground, and people don't even see how beautiful the neighborhoods are and the houses around here, which is unfortunate. And the other bad part about the National Cathedral is they do charge an entrance fee, which is kind of rare for Washington, D.C. Of course, there's a lot of private museums that do charge entrance fees, but all the Smithsonians near the Capitol are all completely free. So along with Georgetown, Cleveland Park was home, and still is home, to a lot of the significant political figures of Washington, D.C. In the 60s and 50s, when President Kennedy was in office, and a little before that, a lot of these homes in Cleveland Park and in Georgetown was where a lot of unofficial diplomacy took place. You had people like Allen Dulles and various diplomats and operatives making deals in a lot of these drawing rooms and in a lot of these townhouses and houses around here. So that can be a pretty interesting thing just to walk through. Every once in a while you'll find a house that has a historical plaque on it, which can be cool to see. Also, we're pretty near at this point where the vice president lives. That's the Observatory Circle, and that's the old Navy base. It was a Navy house that the vice president took over, much to the chagrin of Congress at the time. Some Congress people at the time didn't want to give the vice president that house for some reason. And as we walk through Cleveland Park here, there's some really more urban parts of Cleveland Park too that we're not exactly going to see in this video. But if you get back on Connecticut Avenue and go the opposite way of the White House, just about 3 blocks from here, you're going to get to some really cool Art Deco places. One of them is the Uptown Theater, which unfortunately is defunct right now, but it was a place where a lot of premieres happened, including, I believe, Jurassic Park and 2001: A Space Odyssey had their premieres in Cleveland Park in Washington, D.C., of all places. And I think I'll just take this chance to say that our channel is called Watch Our Steps. We film a lot of videos about beautiful and interesting places, Usually, I don't talk through these. I do on a couple shorts, but basically I thought that since we live in this area and know about it, I would just give my 2 cents. So if you enjoyed that or have any thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Give us a like and subscribe. That would be great. And I might end up not talking through this whole video. Maybe I'll just let you enjoy some of the nature, but figured I'd just hop in every once in a while, add my 2 cents about what we're looking at, or just some general facts about the area, because it is a really beautiful, interesting part of DC that's often overlooked. So if you're trying to get to Cleveland Park and walk around these neighborhoods, your best bet is either to Uber or use the Cleveland Park metro station, which is on the Red Line. It's really easy to get to from pretty much anywhere. As soon as you get off, you're going to be seeing some really beautiful apartment buildings, which is what Cleveland Park is known for, other than these amazing homes. You're going to find some really great restaurants around Cleveland Park, right on Connecticut Avenue, as well as in DuPont Circle, which is just a mile or two from the spot that we're at right now. There's a great sushi place called Sakana. There's also a very good Thai restaurant right when you get off the Cleveland Park Metro. If you need to do any shopping, there's a Target there. And if you go up Connecticut Avenue, the opposite direction of the White House, there's a very good pho restaurant. There's also the Hillwood Estate in this area. That's where Marjorie Merriweather Post lived. She, of course, is famous for also owning Mar-a-Lago. She lived in D.C. She has a great collection of French and Russian art. There's Fabergé eggs. She has excellent gardens. If you're interested in seeing any of that, we have a couple videos on our channel where we go through her greenhouse. We also go through her Japanese garden and just around her whole property. She has an Adirondack house, and it's one of the more spectacular places in Washington, D.C. It looks right upon Rock Creek Park. Also, if you're in the area, you might be interested, at the start of this video, there was a black fence, and if you go down into that area, it's called the Tregarin Conservancy, and there's some really great walking paths in there. There's a bullfrog pond in the spring months, and it can be just a fantastic place to get away from a lot of the normal hustle and bustle of DC, which if you're local, you probably want to do. And if you're going back to DC for, the third or fourth time and you don't feel like looking at the Lincoln Memorial again, I highly recommend going to this area. Of course, as we go through a lot of the houses here, you're going to see that they're not really the same. A lot of them are these beautiful brick homes, but they're all different, and that's because all these people had money and at the time hired individual architects and builders and had a lot of craftsmen come in and did a lot of great and interesting Georgian style as well as Mission Revival homes. There's some really hilly and unique terrain in this area too, and a lot of architects employed different styles while they were building these places. So you come across sometimes randomly, miniature style Tudor Revival homes that just have these little flares and things like that. There's even some prairie style houses. So it can just be a great place for architecture fans to walk by. Also, interestingly enough, the first park and shop, maybe in the country, I know for sure in DC, is in Cleveland Park. It's right when you get off the metro, so if you wanted to do this walk, it would be one of the first things that you saw. It's still there. It was built in 1930, I believe, and it had a Piggly Wiggly in it at the time. Now it's a Target and a couple other stores. One thing that's nice about Cleveland Park is that you're going to find a lot of independent ma and pa shops. Unfortunately, there's no bookstores. You're going to have to go to other parts of town for that, like Georgetown, which which is totally fine. But that's one of the few things that's missing from the area. If you are trying to go to Georgetown, you know, from this spot, the best thing that you can do is basically take the walk that we're going on right now, get to the National Cathedral, and hook a left, and you're going to be on Wisconsin Avenue. And like I said before, you can take that all the way down to the water, and you'll run into all sorts of stuff. If you're looking to shop, there's a Trader Joe's. There's just all sorts of great little tidbits of history along there, old inns and restaurants and really, really cool places. And it connects to the city really well. So if you're trying to get back to Foggy Bottom, there's always a way. And the best bet in this area, it's pretty safe, is just to enjoy yourself and go down some streets if you have the time. Go look at American University. It's absolutely beautiful, a lot better than some of the other universities, and a lot more overlooked too. A lot of people know about Georgetown University or even George Washington, which, the campus is what it is. It's in an urban place, but American University can be just a great place to walk around too. Now, not every house that we walk by is super fancy, although the elites started building here in the 1910s through 1920s. By the time the Great Depression hit, some of these people didn't have money anymore, so the houses that did go up are often not the same style as the ones that went up just a couple years earlier. And so that can be interesting to look around too. There are some newer structures being put up in this area, but for the most part, it maintains its old style really well. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but the Kalorama neighborhood has larger homes, but not as many privately owned homes. A lot of those places are now embassies, and there's a few different parts of the city where you can find embassies. If you want to see a video on that, I'd like to put it out. Kalorama is the most famous. As soon as you're in the neighborhood, you'll probably see the French embassy right away. But there's a really kind of remote and western part of Georgetown where hardly any people go, and that has some embassies as well, including the Japanese embassy. And you can pretty easily access that from this walk if you're willing to take a couple miles. Of course, if it's the summer months, you might not want to do that, and you can totally Uber to that area. There's some really good museums there as well. Now, everybody, we are at the Washington National Cathedral, which I'm sure if you haven't been there in person, you have probably seen on TV, whether you realize it or not. This is where all of the funerals for presidents are held. Anytime you see a video of all the presidents and first ladies all awkwardly sitting there, it's taking place here. The eulogy and ceremony for President Carter, that was here. This is a great building. It is incredibly large. It's the second largest church in the United States, possibly in all of North America. It is absolutely fantastic. It's been damaged by an earthquake. It's impossible to tell where. And this is a building that you can just tell, was built by a really talented craftsman. In this video, I believe that we get to some of the finer details. There's some really funny little things that the builders put in. There's a Darth Vader little relief sort of gargoyle in one of the upper corners that if you're there in person, definitely go try to spot it. You might need your phone camera to zoom in, but it's well worth seeing. Obviously, I said this before, but they do charge an entrance fee, which is unfortunate. But if you feel like going in and looking at the stained glass, it can definitely be worth it. As for the stained glass, there's some controversy around that. When this was built, they put in a lot of important historical figures, including some Confederates. And when all of that stuff was being taken down in 2017, the National Cathedral was no exception. And they came and they took, I think, 2 stained glass panels down, one of Stonewall Jackson and the other of Robert E. Lee. And I actually don't know where those are now or what they replaced them with. But this is a huge building. Not a lot of people really understand the scale of it, but if you laid the Washington Monument down on its side, it would fit inside the main part of the church, which is it's crazy. And a lot of presidents have had their services here. Ronald Reagan, Eisenhower, President Ford, H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter. And if they don't have their services, there's some sort of memorial here. Alright everybody, and that's going to pretty much do it for this video. If you enjoyed the format, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.